Welcome to ENROUTE, the podcast of the First Responder Behavioral Health Institute. The First Responder Behavioral Health Institute is bringing together some of the most inspiring and dedicated change agents in the global public safety, psychotherapy, and educational communities. Each episode of ENROUTE seeks to bring together first responder change agents and clinicians dedicated to constructively disrupting the status quo by tackling the tough subjects like first responder suicide, post-traumatic stress, moral injury, sanctuary trauma, leadership development, critical incident response, peer support teams, and what it means to be psychologically safe and healthy while working in an unsafe world. All units, please stand by. The ENROUTE podcast is about to begin. You can resume normal traffic on this channel after this transmission. Welcome to this episode of ENROUTE I'm Joseph Brigandi. Today, we've been given the opportunity to visit with one of the fire service's many vocal advocates for change, better safety practices, and quality leadership programs. He's a consultant to many first responder agencies. He's also a published author and a fire service instructor. He's dedicated to bringing change and successful transformation to the fire and EMS services. He's a regular contributor to Fire Rescue One, EMS One, and he has a lifetime of service as a firefighter paramedic who retired at the rank of battalion chief. We discuss the evolution of peer support teams, education and training programs, and mental health advocacy within first responder organizations, and what it's like to retire from the fire service. Please join me in welcoming the multi-talented and extremely passionate Robert Avsec to this episode of ENROUTE. Robert Avsec, welcome to this edition of ENROUTE, sir.
Welcome. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invite.
You better believe it. For the folks that haven't had the privilege of reading your columns and getting to know your work, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and your time in the industry?
Well, I was very fortunate. I served for 26 years with the men and women of the Chesterfield, Virginia Fire and EMS Department. Was a firefighter paramedic, retired as a battalion chief paramedic. And after a couple of different stints trying different things in retirement, settled in on being a freelance writer. And I started with my own blog, and it's called Talking Shop for Fire and EMS. We always talked about that in the fire stations when we would be out back and kicking rocks and talking shop and solving the problems of the world. And after about 4 or 5 months of writing my blog, I got a call from a guy named Rick Markley, who was with, at that time, was the editor at firerescue1.com, and asked me if I was interested in writing some pieces for the magazine's online product. And I think I'm over 500 articles now later. Still enjoy doing it, and write not only for them, but EMS1.com, as well as some private customers and clients that I've picked up over the years.
Excellent. You know, I've enjoyed your work for a couple of years now, and have read many of your pieces and your posts, and there's just too many to list. So you're prolific in this space, and you've offered a lot of value with your years of service. One of the things that I find that I enjoy most when I'm reading your work is you touch into the area of mental health and psychology quite a bit. And being a career firefighter paramedic myself and a board certified clinician, I love seeing that move forward. So I call you a mental health advocate. So tell me a little bit about mental health in the fire service, your advocacy, and what got you interested in that subject, sir.
Well, certainly when I was an officer, the good and welfare of my people was very, very important. And I mean, my career spanned 1982 to 2007. And since 2007, since I retired, there are a tremendous increase in the things that are affecting our people from a mental health standpoint. I mean, even before we had the COVID-19 pandemic, I mean, we've seen the rise of gun violence in our country, mass shootings that involve multiple people, our own people getting shot at, the opioid drug epidemic that continues to plague many areas of the country, particularly here in West Virginia. And so I was writing about some stuff, and I came across some literature that referenced the Fire Service Psychology Association, and I made contact with the president and the founder of that particular organization, Dr. Kristen Weldon, in South Pasadena, California, and became a fire service member of this organization that is made up of fire service leaders, psychologists, other mental health clinicians, with a purpose to build a bridge between professional psychology and the fire service. And since 2018, I've been very, very involved in that particular effort. And as we've seen momentum in the need for developing better behavioral health awareness, as well as programs and all of those things to try to keep people in a good mental frame of mind. It's just been very exciting work.
Absolutely. So what exactly does the Fire Service Psychological Association do? They offer classes. Actually, let me go ahead and get us over to their website now, and maybe you can walk us through some of their programs.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we do is and you had that page up, and that was is to inform and educate people that there is no one size fits all when it comes to the mental health needs of firefighters and paramedics. You've got all sorts of folks who were involved in that space, from psychiatrists, psychologists, licensed family counselors, licensed clinical social workers. There's all sorts of folks. I refer to it as the behavioral health toolbox, mm-hmm. right? And you have to number one, do a good assessment and figure out, okay, which tool is going to work best for me, or which tool should I try to point my colleague or my one of the people I work with towards, and and while this list is certainly very educational, and I think it does a good job. Something that I've started promoting recently, and that is been to a couple of conferences lately, interacting with fire service folks, and explaining it using the 4 levels of hazardous materials response. Right?
I love it.
We got 4 levels of hazardous materials response in the fire service, right? We have awareness, operations, technician, and specialist. Well, you have 4 levels basically of behavioral health response when it comes to firefighters and paramedics and EMTs, right? So in awareness, in hazmat, we teach people how to recognize a hazard, how to realize that this is a real problem, isolate, deny entry, and call for help, right? Yep. Don't do anything that you don't know how to do, right? Well, that's your first level of behavioral health for firefighters, is learning what is it? What are the challenges? How do I recognize that things are not working well for myself or for one of my peers or one of my colleagues. How do we truly develop that buddy system? Okay. Operations level for hazardous materials. We teach you, number one, your structural firefighting gear is not chemical protective clothing. Therefore, you do not come in contact with the product ever. Right? It teaches some defensive tactics, how to keep things from getting worse until you call for help and you get the hazmat team out there, the cleanup company, whatever that next level of help is. Okay. Well, on the behavioral health side, that's where our peer support folks come into play, right? These are the people they've had some additional training, some additional education. They can help people recognize, number one, are you adapting well, or perhaps you need some assistance. Okay. Some of the most recent research that we've come upon is that if 10 people are exposed to the same traumatic incident, after 30 days, 8 of those people are going to be doing okay. Their natural ability is going to help their brain process that event, how it made them feel, et cetera, et cetera. So there's only 2 people that we really need to give some more attention to. Okay. And follow up with, because, sometimes in the past, it's certainly the opinion of the psychologists that I work with. And I think it too is, we've been pathologizing the 10 and probably in many cases missing the 2 until it's, now it's 4 or 5 months down the road and this person is living in a bottle.
Yep.
Okay. Now we're going to help them. Rather than, maybe if we became better at picking them up at that 30-day or 60-day, hey man, if you're still having issues 2 months afterwards, maybe we need to get some professional help. Okay. The technician level, right? Hazardous materials, that's the people additional training. They can wear the funky suits. They can go in there. They can control the product, make the situation better, all those things. Well, on the technician level, that's where all of our trained mental health clinicians come into play. Your marriage and family therapists, your licensed clinical social workers, your mass, and all of your master's level clinicians, right? Mm-hmm. And then we get to the specialist level on the hazardous materials side. That's the firefighter hazardous materials technician who's, number one, they have to have experience, they have to have knowledge to go on to that next level where they learn how to be even better at understanding what kind of a problem is happening, what we can do about it, how to manage a large, complex situation, etc. And on the mental health side, that's where our psychologists fall into the picture. Okay. And so just like a hazmat team, you don't need to have a whole hazmat team made up of specialists, right? But you need to have everybody being on that awareness level, right? And all firefighters now are trained to the operations level, right? And then you got that group that goes on to technician, right? And if you're going to have a formal hazmat team or a formal behavioral health team in your organization, you're going to need more technicians than you're going to need specialists.
Yeah.
All right. But you need that specialist to give you that program oversight, right? Just like on the medical side, Joe, I'm sure you had many dealings with your OMD, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right? Your OMD, that's your oversight and your guidance for the care that you provide to the public. Well, behavioral health really needs that same kind of guidance and oversight from the operational behavioral health director, which should be a psychologist.
Okay.
But we need everybody.
Well,
we need all of those levels.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. I do want to pick that bone slightly with the psychologist, somehow being a little bit more, and that's an area where we respectfully disagree a little bit, but not much. And I'll tell you the reason for my why here on that. Psychologists, some of them are do only testing. Some of them are gifted at data collection. Some of them actually are therapists and do client and patient treatment. But what I've really enjoyed about what you've said in your descriptions is that you're advocating a collaborative approach of using all of the members. And when I read that article that you had written in this area, I was like, ooh, got me riled up a little bit. And then I went to your website and I saw how you were breaking down what everybody does, and it really warmed my heart. One of the challenges I've faced here in Texas with a couple of large departments, and hopefully you can help me articulate that, is this. Psychologists started in mental health first because they started in police departments. So they became the most known. All right, that's great. So unfortunately, I've got a couple of agencies, rather large ones, saying we only use psychologists. And I'm like, wait a minute here. That there's some problems with that. We only use psychologists because the truth of it is each one has a little bit different, especially but all of them have gone under a 3,000-hour board certification, which doesn't teach you anything about trauma. That's something you've got to pick up after you get your 3,000 hours and after you become board certified, regardless of whether you're a psychologist, licensed marriage family therapist, a social worker, a licensed professional counselor. So you guys are missing some great candidates here. So what you're telling me is if one of our members goes back after, as I did, after 35 years of service, goes on and gets board certified and everything, that this particular large-scale fire department will only hire psychologists. And I'm getting feedback from the senior administration that are like, Joseph, this person had 4 years experience as a psychologist, has never put on a pair of combat boots, never been in this field, still struggles to understand our culture, but we only hire psychologists. I'm like, okay. But I loved everything you're saying. There's a collaborative approach. We need a couple of psychologists. We need a psychiatrist or two. Medical direction has to start to go into behavioral health medical direction, which is one of the reasons I love my medical director, Dr. Perlman, still with me. I don't need a medical director under any statute to do my crisis response team work. I choose to have one. He was my medical director the last 8 years I was in the field as a fire captain responding, and he was one of the first people to say, Joseph, we need a debriefing. We need an educational component here. We need to have you guys come out. And then he followed me into the Institute. Yeah. So what I guess I'm seeing is sometimes they're not being collaborative. They're not recognizing that everyone needs a seat at the table. And when you say we only use X, you're denying some really great clinicians who might have given a full career to, fire, EMS, or law enforcement before they became that.
Well, that's a good point that you make. Okay, is psychology has had a presence in law enforcement for decades. I mean, in the early '60s. Law enforcement started using psychologists, particularly for hostage negotiations.
Yes. Okay.
And so that's how they became ingrained into the culture, right? Well, we don't have that in the fire. Actually, the American Psychological Association, APA, Division 18, is law enforcement and public service. Yeah. Okay. Very clear guidelines as to how psychologists should work in the law enforcement space, and that's why one of our vision for FSPA is to eventually have a division recognized by APA of fire psychology. Because and not only is it an issue with some departments who say, well, we're only going to use psychologists, but it's also many departments that say, well, we've got all of this over here, whether it's pre-employment psychological assessments or fitness for duty assessments, etc. But the problem is that was all developed for law enforcement.
Yeah.
And I'm about to preach to the choir here, okay? But did you ever see the movie My Big Fat Greek Wedding?
I did.
Okay. Remember the wedding reception when Michael Constantine, her dad, gets up there and says, the Millers are like apples and we are oranges. We different, but we all fruit.
There you go.
Right?
Nice.
Public safety, yeah, we're all fruit.
Yeah.
But we're as different from law enforcement as apples are from oranges.
Yeah.
Okay? And that's one of the things that I've helped my psychologist colleagues learn and understand is that, law enforcement officers are trained from day one to operate as a single unit.
Yeah.
Right? So many law enforcement agencies still subscribe to the Texas Ranger motto, one riot, one ranger.
I see you've been here a few times.
Yeah. Okay. Whereas in the fire service, we're taught from day one how to operate as a team, how important it is to operate as a team, how important it is to follow the leadership of your company officer. That whole philosophy permeates through everything that we do. And so that's why one of the big things that we are promoting at FSPA is culturally competent clinicians.
Excellent.
All right. Clinicians, whether they're psychologists, licensed counselors, marriage and family therapists, if you're going to work with firefighters, then you need to understand why they do the job, what the job entails, how they go about doing it, the conditions under which they operate, and what are some of the unique stressors that they're exposed to in the course of doing their job. Okay, I saw a thing just the other day, okay, where there had been a missing 5-year-old girl in a town up in New England, okay, and they found the little girl, right, and who was obviously deceased.
Yeah.
Okay, she'd been missing for several days, right? And the person who posted this on social media was saying, hey, be a little bit more understanding if the police officers or firefighters in the town are, maybe a little on edge, or because they didn't send them home.
Yeah.
They found this little girl, cleaned them up, told them, all right, go back to what you were doing before this happened.
Yeah.
What the
yeah.
It's sometimes it's hard to believe it's 2023.
Yeah, it is.
It is.
And it's interesting because I face this with my crisis response teams, which I started in the fire service and then transitioned it into the Counseling Center of Texas. And that team is now transitioning into the First Responder Behavioral Health Institute. But many a time I've met with administrative pushback on this, something as atrocious as this situation. And we'll come on out and we'll do a debriefing, diffusing, and just check on things. Our crisis response team will come on out and they're like, I want them to go back to work. And I'm like, I'd like you to call in the next shift, please. These people need extra time. This was a horrific tragedy, a 4 or 5 person fatality, a child, expecting them to just snap back out of here in 20 minutes after we talk mental health and be at their best is not in their best interest or yours. And I've met with absolute understanding. Let me get the next crew in here. And I've met with complete and total, you're not in charge. We're not following your advice. And they need to get back out to work because that's the way it was done with me. And I'm like, oh, my least favorite sentence in the whole English language, because that's the way we've always done it, see? And that's what, or next is that's what they signed on for. And then I often will look at the calendar and go, what year am I standing in?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, and that's you mentioned peer support teams. I was shocked. I got a chance to speak about 24 months ago to all of our medical directors in the state of Texas. I got about 180 of them in a room, and I asked them to please, and if, for the folks that aren't in our business who don't know, a medical director is an extra special kind of physician. Not only are you an ER doctor, but you've also decided that that's not enough stress and that you want to go ahead and be in charge of the paramedics. So,
who are out there working on your license sight unseen.
There it is.
Yeah.
Let's have no small amount of anxiety. So I had asked them, I said, hey, how many of you have peer support programs that are running? 180 people in the room, 30 people put up their hands. I'm like, this is a really nice cross-section of the state of Texas right here. And then I said, okay, how many of you have clinically directed peer support teams? If there's a clinician in the mix, somebody, and then we were down to about 12 hands. So you've dealt with peer support teams a lot. What's your wisdom, your insight? Should they be clinically directed? And what are some of your thoughts on peer support's growth?
Well, it's I was at a conference a couple weeks ago, all right? And a very good conference put on by Brothers Helping Brothers outside of Dayton, Ohio. Okay. And they had a panel discussion about peer support. Had 3 folks on there, and I'm sitting in the back of the room, and as I'm listening to all this, and go back to my earlier discussion about how the 4 levels of hazardous materials response match up with behavioral health. And I'm listening to this, right? And they're talking about the challenges and this, and so forth and so on. And I'm saying to myself, these folks are getting into the product.
Yeah.
They're getting into the product. They're taking on other people's issues.
Yeah.
That's the job of a trained clinician.
Mm-hmm.
That's why people like you went back to school to learn how to listen to another person's issues and problems, etc., and not take them on as your own, but to help them deal with it and process it.
Here.
So that they could move to a better place. Okay. And I'm sitting here and I'm listening to these people, and I'm looking around the room, and everybody else is going, yeah. I'm going, folks, you're not supposed to be getting into the product.
Yeah.
Recognize that there's, we truly have a hazardous materials release here.
Yeah.
And I've been trained to defensive tactics to, conduct a debriefing or, check in with everybody, etc. But, once you identify that somebody is maybe not doing so well, that's when you got to get on the phone and call for the hazmat team.
Exactly.
That's when you got to call for the clinicians in the, in the mix.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so I think peer support teams are, again, they're a necessary component.
Yeah.
All right. But you can't get in contact with the product.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that's certainly something that I think needs to be looked at. And okay, how do we address this? Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, one of the things that we have come across in research is trauma risk management, which is a program that was birthed in the United Kingdom Marines right? There's been several research studies done on it. It's been promulgated now into law enforcement in the UK. It's been promulgated into all of the military services in the United States and the UK. Department of Veterans Affairs, all sorts of organizations here in the country. And what basically just the elevator speech about trauma risk management is, it doesn't involve debriefings or conversations or whatever, because if you go back to what's the basis for CISM and people talking, okay, it's catharsis.
Yeah.
It's Freudian psychology that if you talk about your problems and we talk about it long enough, your problems will resolve themselves. But unfortunately, that's not how the human brain works.
Yeah.
Okay. And so what trauma risk management is it's a, when I first heard about it, when I first read about it, when Dr. Weldon wrote her white paper about it, is, you know what, this is psychological first aid. Okay. This is giving peer support version 2.0.
Nice.
Okay. Version 2.0. These are the things that when those 10 people are exposed to a traumatic incident, okay, this is the assessment that you do with these people, okay? Right now, right? Well, I say right now, 72 hours after the incident, okay? Things like, how are you sleeping? Okay? How's your normal activity, et cetera, et cetera. So 72 hours, we get a baseline. And that's all we do. We get a baseline.
Mm-hmm.
We wait, we check in with you at that 30-day mark.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Go through the same assessment now. So now we got a baseline and we got a 30-day, right? Now we're getting pretty close to identifying the two.
Yes.
The 2 people out of 10 who, no matter how long you give them, they may not ever process what happened without some additional resources, right? And to me, especially after hearing all this discussion, to me, that's what would be a huge help to peer support teams in creating acceptable boundaries.
Yes.
And not becoming overwhelmed with, because, you know, peer support teams, they're out there doing their job too. They're being exposed to mental health stresses, right? So why do we want them to take on additional? We want them to take care of themselves too. But we do need their knowledge and experience and training, right, at that operations level to help us figure out who really needs the clinicians, the psychologists, okay? And one thing I was going to jump in there back when you were talking about psychologists in the big fire departments and whatnot, okay? And you're absolutely right, okay? Psychologists come in all shapes and forms, right? And in fact, I'm really kind of hooked on analogies, okay? But, you know, I used to be a real big baseball fan until the steroid era. You know, and, you know, I just can't tolerate cheaters.
Yep.
But anyway, there are psychologists, you know, psychologists are like baseball players, right? Some of them, you know, maybe assessment is their shtick, okay? Maybe it's intervention, working with patients and treatments, et cetera, or industrial and organizational psychology, looking at those big picture organizational issues that you made reference to earlier, okay? Operations, right? How do we help people make better decisions under stress, which is basically the profession of firefighters and EMTs and paramedics, right? Making critical decisions under stress. Okay. So, those are the 4 domains of psychology. Well, all psychologists receive training in all 4 of those domains, but they choose to, most of them, to specialize in 1 or 2, perhaps, But you do have psychology, and I forgot the 5th one, which is consultation, which kind of runs through all 4 of those domains, okay? Well, you do have clinicians who I refer to as 5-tool players. And a 5-tool player in baseball is a player who can hit for power, hit for average, got a great throwing arm, fields their position well, and has got good foot speed.
Nice.
Right? Okay. Is every psychologist a 5-tool player? Nope. Is every baseball player a 5-tool player? Nope. But are baseball teams successful with only one, maybe 5-tool player? Sure. But they still got those other 8 positions that they got to fill, right?
Yeah.
And so going back to what we, kind of where we started this whole thing is there is no silver bullet. There is no one size fits all. When it comes to firefighter behavioral health, we've got to learn and understand that we need all 9 positions filled, and maybe 1 or 2 of them need to be filled by a 5-tool player. But everybody else has got an awful lot that they can contribute, and that's where the medical oversight by a clinical psychologist is to me there should be no difference between what we expect out of them and what we expect out of an OMD.
Yep.
Okay, and that is, we expect you to provide the guidance, direction, to help us develop good programs that are research-based, programs that we not only put in place, but we monitor and see how well we're doing. Just all those things that we've got experience doing with EMS.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the programs that do EMS well, right? We got the model. Between EMS and hazmat, we've got all the models we need to build behavioral mental health over here in fire service organizations. We just have to gain a better understanding of what are all the available pieces.
Mm-hmm.
What are all the available pieces, and how do we put them together?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I love your analogies. When you were mentioning, that 5-part player, someone that can handle all of these positions. Yeah, it's not everybody by a long shot. I'm privileged to know a couple of them, and we have them on our faculty over at the First Responder Behavioral Health Institute. People like Roger Solomon, who's been a police psychologist, a hostage negotiator, treating clinician, world-renowned educator. Yeah, they don't. Not everyone is going to have all 5 of those pieces for us, and the diversity in staff. I also loved what you had to say about peer support programs and getting in a little too far. I've actually had peer support programs interfere with behavioral health. Not a lot, but every now and then it does come up. Somebody's struggling really bad. And I'm like, why wasn't I notified? And they're like, well, he made us promise. I'm like, he made you promise, did he? Okay, great. So you guys got involved in this too far. You went too deep. And instead of setting professional boundaries or calling it up the chain, well, we don't have a protocol. I'm like, oh, here we go, which is one of the reasons I try to get into agencies and talk to them about, please, we're not bad at doing things in emergency medicine. Everybody thinks we run into somebody's house, do an assessment, save a life, and it's broadcast television worthy. No, as I tell them, what we do is we write a protocol. It's approved by a medical director, and then we drill you to where you can't fail. Drill you to where you can't fail. Where are the protocols for peer support teams? Where's the clinical direction of peer support teams? And if your peer support team is meeting in a bar, chances are probably good.
And what else do we do with protocols? EMS protocols? We revise them from time to time.
Yeah.
Right? When new science comes about or a new therapeutic modality is proven through research, right? We put it into our protocols, right? I mean, you were at it as long as I was, so you know what it's like to be like Johnny Gage and popping those sodium bicarbs, right?
Yeah, I do.
It's not even in the protocols anymore.
Yeah.
You know? And it was because the medical research said, don't make a shit. Oh, excuse me. I didn't mean.
It's all right.
It didn't make a difference.
Yeah.
So don't do it anymore.
Yep.
Okay? Yep. And we need to, that's why we need to get ahead of where we're current. Fortunately, in my humble opinion, we're at least 30 years behind what law enforcement has done in behavioral health. Yeah. Okay? But we got a chance to get it right.
Yeah.
We got a chance. The canvas is blank, right? The canvas is blank. But the thing is, okay, in the fire service, all right, we have a certain amount of rigidity, right? We got that old thing that says, well, it's probably like 260 years now of tradition, unhampered by progress, right? And that has always frosted my jets, right? Because we're smarter than that.
Hear, hear.
We're smarter than that. We should be doing a heck of a lot better. But anyway, okay. But because we are so rigid, right? People go, well, show me an NFPA standard, or show me this standard, or show me that standard. You know, where is it? You know, behavioral health is got like a 2-sentence message in NFPA 1500, the health and safety standard for firefighters.
Yeah.
Okay. But the people who are working on things like that, they're not psychologists.
Yeah.
They're not people who have been trained in assessing, in developing program, in helping other people develop their programs. Mm-hmm. Okay. And you know, just like with EMS, any behavioral health program that a fire department develops has got to be it's got to be a process. It's got to be a process of how do we develop procedures? How do we reevaluate them periodically? Because the landscape is changing. The landscape is changing. And hopefully that's one of the things that we at FSPA are hoping that we can help change the landscape, and that is getting more research done that is done with firefighters, right? Yeah. Everybody's looking for the solution of why are firefighters committing suicide? But we don't understand, first of all, why. Yep. Why are they committing suicide? Until you understand the why for any situation, any solution fits.
There you go.
Okay. And so, you know, one of the, our mission is to help develop the scientific and research aspects of psychology and the fire service, because we feel that's a real important element in helping to bridge that gap between professional psychology and the fire service. Okay. And for those people who maybe don't get that analogy, okay, but it's developing those culturally competent clinicians, right, who know and understand firefighters, so that the first time firefighter goes to see him, they don't start crying when the firefighter tells them what they just witnessed. Had people at our conference down in Atlanta at the beginning of October, psychologists relating stories like that, where when a firefighter got to them after 2 or 3 other psychologists, okay, we got to do better than that, right? But anyway, that's this side of the bridge. And on the other side of the bridge is a fire service that's very much stigmatized about mental health, right? Very distrustful. We are very much a very parochial service, right? We help other people with their problems. So therefore, if we have a problem in the fire service, we will figure out a way to solve the problem. That hasn't always served us well in the past, and it's certainly not going to serve us well when it comes to behavioral health.
Yeah.
Okay. I was a damn good firefighter. I was a damn good paramedic, right? But I didn't know jack squat about mental health. Yeah. And unless I went back to school like you did, okay, I still don't know.
Yeah.
But I'm getting master's level education working with all these psychologists, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, you are.
Because they got a real willingness to share with me, because I'm sharing with them to help them understand, that, one thing, that I think is important for anybody, any psychologist or clinician who's wants to work in the fire service space, is, number one, there is no fire service in the United States.
Yeah.
Okay. We're like the old Indian nations and tribes that, covered the United States. And so, it's not only becoming culturally competent about how fire departments work in general, but that's why we've in the cultural competency training that we've developed, it's important enough that we developed a 40-hour task book for clinicians to use during their ride-alongs with whatever department they want to work with.
Nice.
Okay. And in that task book are specific things that the officer in the station goes over with them. Yeah. Everything as simple as, what does an officer do on this piece of fire apparatus? What does the driver do? What does the firefighter do? Okay. What are some of the challenges that those positions face in doing their job? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Putting them in turnout gear, right? You don't have to have a live fire. Put them in turnout gear, put them in SCBA, and let them drag a charged 1 3/4 hose line around the fire station for 5 minutes, yeah. Right? And they immediately understand how that's going to affect your decision-making process, right? Just the fact that you are physically uncomfortable now.
Yeah. Nice.
And we haven't even introduced any real stress to the situation. But see, that's the thing that even we firefighters don't understand is, as soon as we do that, as soon as we put that gear on, and as soon as we start to head to work, we've already introduced stress.
Oh, yeah.
We've already introduced stress, okay? And I love the work that Dr. Denise Smith does up in Saratoga Springs, New York, talking about heat and the stress that heat puts on firefighters. She refers to the terrible twins.
Yeah.
The terrible twins. Hyperthermia and dehydration.
Yeah.
As soon as you start getting hot and as soon as you start getting dry, you start getting physiological changes, and guess what? The melon, The melon is not immune.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And, you made me remember something my wife has said more than once, and one of my kids who came to work with me a fair bit, that the split second I put on the uniform, I change. My posture changes, my awareness changes, my situational awareness changes. I'm aware of anybody that could walk up at any time. We look a little too much like law enforcement. What's going to approach us. There's a change in the vocabulary. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Clarity, more of a command mindset and a mentality. And that's not even putting in the turnouts and introducing the stress of responding to a call. So we change. But one of the things I love so much about what you have said, I love, and found a deep kindred spirit here on so many levels. Research. There's too many people doing too much work in this space who are not including clinical mental health professionals of any stripe. A major institution recently did an 8-hour program where they're making you a mental health officer. Not one therapist, not one psychologist, not one counselor was involved in the development of that curriculum. Yet they're selling certificates, and you get your 8-hour training and a certificate, and that's wonderful. I think not really.
So. And behavioral health is not even mentioned in the health and safety officer standard.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing you mentioned is culturally competent clinicians. And I have to have this discussion a lot. We offer 3 levels of training for clinicians who want to become behavioral health clinical responders here. Someone had mentioned the other day, isn't the Fire Service Psychological Association a competitors of yours? I said, no, they're not. Number one, we're competing against the same problem. First responder suicidality. Number 2, there simply are not enough voices in this space that are advocating for change. So when I designed our programs and this particular podcast, I wanted to take everybody who is making a positive impact in this space and help to give them a voice. Culturally competent clinicians, oh my goodness. As a trauma specialist, I will often hear from my first responders that I'm the 3rd to 6th clinician that they have gone to before they lock in with me for 6 to 18 months, 24 to 36 months, and they are healed, flying high, passing promotional exams again, getting married where they were, having a turnover relationship after turnover, substance abuse going down and eliminated. That takes work, and it really takes time in the clinical suite to address all of those issues. But everybody wants to help first responders, and that's wonderful. But we also have that problem. There's an organization given an 8-hour certificate, and you can become a first responder clinician, and they don't have them like you guys do any ride outs. They don't have them taking the exhaustive levels of training we're trying to provide. And one of my members said, hey, I went into the therapist, and I talked to her about the decapitation, and she hyperventilated, passed out, and he had to call it in. So much to say here. My dark humor takes over, and I immediately say, I hope she didn't charge for the session.
Let me just add to what you just said, okay?
Please.
When I say we're working to build a bridge, right?
Yeah.
What does it take to build a bridge? It takes all sorts of tradespeople, right? So if we're going to build this bridge, it's not a question of, what is the Fire Service Psychology Association or the Firefighter Behavioral Health Institute or whatever, okay? It's how do we bring all these people together so that, number one, we build the right bridge. Number 2, it's a functional bridge that's going to meet the needs for, quite a long time. Nobody builds a bridge to last for a week, right?
Exactly.
Except maybe the Army Corps of Engineers, because they're trying to get some tanks across the river. Okay. But I mean, most of us, most of the time we're building a bridge because we need to sustain traffic.
Here.
And that's another analogy. It's always going to be how well are we sharing back and forth between the worlds of psychology and the fire service, and as things are changing in both of those areas, that we're staying abreast of what we're doing, so that when psychology through research and studies finds that, hey, what we were doing here doesn't work, okay, that gets communicated across the bridge over here to the psychologists who are working with fire departments to say, we need to change our protocol.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the latest research is showing that what we're doing is not as effective as it could be.
There you go. I couldn't agree more. Now I want to kind of transition us into an area that's often been a struggle. And that is the organizational development, leadership development piece. As a clinician, when I'm working with a first responder, my index of suspicion of suicidality starts to go through the roof when I look at three areas. The call that brought you in here, okay, fine, that's the tip of the iceberg. How things are going on in home, in their home life. Do we have a good, healthy psychology in the home? And then when I really start getting concerned, and the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, it's how are things going at work with the administration? And then I'll hear things like, they're trying to get rid of me over this, or a case that really frosted me. I love that terminology that you used to talk about frosting my jets. I had this amazing firefighter who had come to me and really wanted to deal with his issues. We sent him to the IAFF Center for Excellence. He got glowing letters of excelling in their programs. He was meeting with me twice a week for over a year. I don't write letters often in support of a member, but I wrote a glowing letter that he had met and exceeded every single thing I could have asked, that I had demonstrative measurements that his PTSD scores had dropped from PTSD to PTSI and to just post-stress, that I charted it. I did my work as a clinician. The IAFF Center for Excellence supported everything I had done and documented their work. He went right back to the fire service. This agency's got about 3,000 members, and said, listen, I'm ready to go back to work. And they said, no. So the leadership, and we wonder why suicidality starts to go through the roof. Well, there is an organizational development piece. OD psychology is a thing. And our fire leadership is promoted because they were good at what they do. And that is, command scenes on a fire ground. But leadership, OD, is a psychological discipline. Leaders play a role in this. The Canadians have come up with the term sanctuary trauma. A lot of other people are talking about the term moral injury. What do you have to say about leadership in general and how that impacts the mental health of our first responders?
Well, I think you're number one. Your case study, if you will, is a perfect example of what needs to not happen. Right? If we're really going to work on reducing the stigma associated with firefighters getting help with a behavioral health issue, then those kinds of scenarios have got to become history. I rose to the level of middle management in my department as a battalion chief. So I've seen how important it is to, and I worked for, I will say it time and again, I worked for probably the best fire department, at least east of the Mississippi, if not the entire country. Okay, we tried to stay on the cutting edge of things, and when the conditions changed and said you need to change the way you're doing business, we did. Okay, and I think that's that kind of a mindset, that kind of hey, we don't settle for second best. What does it take to do it right? That's what every fire department is going to need if they want to truly take care of their people. Okay, and that's why the industrial and industrial organizational
yeah.
aspect of psychology, that domain That's why it's a recognized domain in psychology, right? Is we most of us wind up working with groups,
Mm-hmm.
right? And particularly in the fire service, where, as I mentioned, we're trained from day one to be a functional member of a group. And so, when the group disowns us, as in the case of that fire department disowning that firefighter despite the tremendous progress that he made, right? That's how can you characterize that as anything other than a moral injury?
Yeah.
Okay. And it doesn't even have to be at the department level, right? I mean, we have a long history of eating our own in the fire service, right? And so that's the kind of stuff that psychology can bring from an organizational perspective. Is how do we get rid of that in the fire service? How do we function? If we're saying that the team is such an important function at the fire station level, well, how do we make those teams better at taking care of each other?
Yeah.
Right. And then how does that have to translate into how do battalion chiefs take better care of their company officers so that they can take better care of their people? And how do deputy chiefs take better care of battalion chiefs? Okay. We had a very interesting one of the presentations at our conference in Atlanta at the beginning of October was a fella named Vince Anderson, who is a fire prevention specialist with the Redlands, California Fire Department. And his presentation was about the psychological stressors of being in a fire prevention and code enforcement position in a fire department. And I thought it was a fascinating take, okay, on something that had never occurred to me before. Yeah. Right. And so, there are so many aspects that we haven't even thought about. Because once again, as firefighters, we're trained to be firefighters. We're not trained to be psychologists. We're not trained to be clinical counselors, social workers. Although I tell you what, more and more we need to be providing social work training to firefighters.
Yeah. Yeah.
Probably one of the articles I wrote for Fire Rescue One that got the most negative comments was when I wrote an article that said we need to stop training firefighters to be Marines.
Mm-hmm. Here.
Okay.
Yeah.
We got a bazillion hours of how to put out fires. We're in my department, I think it's now 18 weeks is the entry level academy is 18 weeks, right? And even today there's probably 4 hours devoted to fire prevention work. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't even hazard a guess as how much of behavioral health is a part of that, or all those things that you were talking about as far as paramedicine with, the psychology of taking care of other people, right?
Yeah. I'm as a paramedic instructor, I've been mortified as I look at our manuals. I probably have every paramedic book ever written and EMT manual in the industry. Not one page in any of them about how to take care of yourself. Not one. They're focused on treatment. And okay, let's focus on treatment. Around 20 pages or so in the paramedic manual, about 6 or 7 in the EMT manuals. Well, what are they focused on? Half of those 15 to 20 pages are focused on physical or chemical restraint of the patient. Nothing about de-escalation, nothing about dealing with a suicidal person, nothing about understanding psychosis, nothing about differentiating between bipolar, schizophrenia, violence, or just depression, and how to talk with and work with somebody in a state of crisis. So basically, zero behavioral health training on how to deal with the public, just how to use chemicals, tie them up, lock them up, not hurt yourself. And they always give you an ideal scenario in the images where there's like 7 firefighters there ready to go. Hey, I'm never, ever have I had to put hands on someone and had it look like that picture. There's just a couple, 3 of us, and we're getting thrown around the room. And nobody tried de-escalation. Nobody tried giving them space, and nobody went ahead and worked through a process to go ahead and get them help. So it's a struggle for sure. And that's one of the reasons we started offering training.
Again, that's why I think the first thing that most fire departments would benefit from greatly, okay, is having a psychologist work with them and give them a no holds barred assessment of what are all of the psychological threats, risks, factors that affect your people.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more.
Because what are we taught as paramedics, right? Patient assessment.
Yeah.
You don't start treating until you've assessed them and you've figured out what may be wrong, right? On the fire side, right? What do we constantly 360-degree assessment, size up, right? Understand the problem before you start trying to solve the problem.
Here.
And I just think that there's, so many different moving parts to the psychological aspects of what a fire department does, whether it's taking care of ourselves, whether it's taking care of the people we work with, whether it's taking care of the people that we respond, whether it's our business at home with our families, all of those things, and all kinds of stuff spinning off of each of those.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's why, I go back again to every fire department doesn't need a whole bunch of specialists, but they need a whole bunch of technicians.
Yeah.
And they need a whole bunch of people at the operations level, and everybody in the organization, from the fire chief down to the newest recruit, needs to have a really good understanding of the awareness. What are the things that I need to always be kind of heads up about?
Yep. Couldn't agree more. I've got a couple more questions as we start to wind down. One of them is in the area of retirement. Another area where we call everybody family, and then we get you to your last day, you get a cake. You get an axe. We hope you don't use it. And then all of a sudden you're severed from service. I got to speak to the Australians a while ago, and they're light years ahead of us in behavioral health. They have what they call a 5 to 0 program. So 5 years before you're getting ready to retire, they want to know about it. Then they want to go ahead and ask questions about your finances. Are you really set up to retire? Will you be working? What kind of hobbies, what kind of things are you planning to do? So they really help you to slowly transition out of their emergency services. And we don't seem to have much of that in place. So what are some of your thoughts on the psychology of starting to retire, plan towards retirement as a police, fire, EMS, or transitions even out of the military? What do you think about retirement and psychology?
Well, if the article I previously mentioned about stop training firefighters like Marines was the most negative comments, the most positive comments I've ever gotten on a Fire Rescue One article is an article, The 7 Truths About Fire Service Retirement.
Okay.
And it is. It's there's a lot. I refer to it as it's like a divorce.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it's amiable.
Yeah.
Okay. It's still, you're separating, right? You're the family that you've been a part of for 20, 25, 30 years, right? You're not there anymore. Okay. And yeah, you got visitation rights. You can stop by the station and stuff like that. But, eventually there aren't any people there that anymore.
Yeah.
Okay. I retired December 2007. Okay. When I was in our onboarding session in 1982, they explained to us that they said, you are now employees of Chesterfield County, and therefore you're also covered under the Virginia retirement system. And in the Virginia retirement system, firefighters and police officers can retire at 50 years of age and 25 years of service. You have to have that combination. And I set my sights right then and there on when was that date. Because I knew I didn't want, I loved the job as much the first day as I did the last. I guess I'm supposed to say that the other way around, right? Loved it the most the last as I did the first.
Yeah.
Okay. But, the realities are you don't want to be a firefighter and be 60. I couldn't do, I just turned 66, right? There's no way in the world I could do the job of a firefighter. Oh, I could do it. The question is, can I walk tomorrow?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I wake up in the morning and go, why does that hurt?
Yeah.
Right? Okay. So I think the things that I have learned is and that program in Australia sounds marvelous, okay? Because one of the things that was included in my article, 7 Truths About Fire Service Retirement, was the importance of planning and its influence on how satisfied you were with retirement. And I can't recall his name right off the top of my head, but I came across executive fire officer applied project that was done by a fella, and he talked to like 250, I guess, 250 retirees in the Tucson, Phoenix, Arizona area. Okay, and he found that 93% of his surveyed fire service retirees were satisfied with their retirement. Mm-hmm. And he found that the things that had the most influence on that satisfaction were they had planned to retire. They made sure that they had financial planning in place, right? So, hey, look, this is what I want to do. This is what, they had a plan for chapter 2.
There you go. Yeah.
Okay. Whether that was going to be, travel, whether it was going to be, working in another job, another profession, or something else in the fire service or whatever. Okay. But they had a plan. Okay. And this is something too that I think also factors into the mental aspects of our profession. Okay. And it was the topic of an article I wrote on my blog, and that is, what are you doing to prepare for the tomorrow that never comes?
Yeah. There's
no guarantee that you're going to make it to retirement.
Yep.
Right? Every firefighter is one career-ending injury away. Okay?
Well put.
So that's why when I say I started planning for my retirement, when I was planning for everything in between. That included getting my education. That included, getting into the National Fire Academy's Executive Fire Officer program. Because I knew that, number one, in 25 years, I was going to have to be doing something else because that's what I wanted to do Actually wound up working 26 years because I had to wait till I turned 50. Okay. But the other thing too is that along the way, I was preparing myself for what happens if I blow a knee out?
Yeah.
What happens if a house falls on me?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I think that's something else that factors into that behavioral health aspect of don't just be planning for retirement, right? Be preparing yourself to be more than a firefighter.
There you go.
Right. And I would have young firefighters ask me all the time, back when I was going to college in the late 80s, early 90s, that was not the norm.
Mm-hmm.
Even in my fire department was not the norm. Okay. And I would have my firefighters ask me all the time, say, Chief, how is going to college going to make me a better firefighter? I said, it's not.
Yeah.
It's not. Okay. But doing college level work is going to do three things for you. Number one, you're going to learn to write. Okay. And I can tell you, ever since I became an officer, being able to write is an important thing. And it was even more important the day I became a paramedic. Okay. Number two, it's going to teach you critical thinking. Okay. How to take information that you don't know anything about, process it, and put it into some coherent thought. I said, once again, something helps me out every day. Okay. And the third thing is you're going to learn how to work on a deadline. Because as long as they get your money, colleges don't care whether you do the work.
Yeah.
They don't care whether you pass or fail. Okay. And I said, you know what? I bet you if you take those three attributes and shop them around to any business or company, whatever, they're going to say, hell yeah, that's the secret to success right there.
Yep.
We can teach you everything else you need to know about selling widgets or whatever. Okay.
Yeah.
But those three things right there.
Brilliant. And a great explanation of the educational system. Well done, sir. So one of my last questions is this. We know so many of our members are struggling, that suicide is, a high thing, a high statistical problem in the fire service, police, fire, EMS. What message do you have for our members who might be struggling right now?
Don't be afraid to ask for help. Okay? One of the big hurdles that we have overcome in the fire service is the stigma of calling for help when you're in a Mayday situation. Right? I remember when I came on the job, there was no such thing as Mayday.
Yeah.
Right? The only thing it said in the IFSTA manual was when you're in trouble, call for help.
Yeah.
Never define what is trouble.
Mm-hmm.
How do you call for help? I mean, it wasn't until Dr. Burt Clark started writing about it in the late 80s and defined what are those situations where a firefighter is just not going to get out of the jam without help, that we developed Mayday. We developed Mayday procedures. We developed Mayday training, and it's become the way we do business. And I think we have to get to that same point when it comes to asking for help.
Yeah. A mental health Mayday.
A mental health Mayday. Wrote an article about that. Okay. Not only on duty, but off duty. How do you call an off duty mental health Mayday?
Nice.
Right? Because we don't leave our issues and problems at the fire station. Right? So number one, when I'm talking about an off-duty Mayday protocol, guess who needs to be trained on that? The people who are at home.
There you go.
Right? They're the ones that are going to pick up on the signs and go, hey, you know what? You need to call a Mayday.
Yeah.
And it needs to become okay to call the Mayday.
There you
right?
go.
I'm hoping that we don't have any fire departments in 2023 that if somebody calls a Mayday and it really wasn't all that bad, that they don't get chastised or written up for that or whatever, right? I'm hoping that we're saying, hey, good job. Okay. Yeah. Wasn't as bad as you initially thought. Wasn't as bad as we initially thought. But the important thing is you were thinking.
There you go.
And I think that's where we need to get when it comes to behavioral health and those situations that perhaps are leading someone down the road, whether it's suicide ideology, alcohol abuse, drug abuse, whatever, right? We need to get to the point where everybody feels comfortable going, Mayday.
Nice. Nicely put. When they let me add the extra day, I do a 3-day and a 4-day peer support training. When they let me add the 4th day, it's for the families. And that's part of what I'm trying to do is say, hey, you have a voice in this. And also I want my peer support teams to be able to be heavy in number. In a 300-person department, I recommend, 30 to 40 people on that team so that you've got one team just like we do on our shifts. So there's 10 or 12 people available, 10 or 12 people for backup, and 10 or 12 people that are completely off so that they're not getting burnt out and that we're able to cycle through other than have that same 5 or 6 people always showing up on peer support, doing their main primary duties and continuing to take on the vicarious trauma of our members. So invest in your peer support team programs, include families in them. Mental Health Mayday is a thing. One of the last things I want to talk to you about, and I could talk to you all day, and I enjoyed our discussion so much, an absolute kindred spirit and somebody who is taking advocacy in a wonderful direction. You have written a book. How do we get a hold of your book if you want to buy it? And bookings. Where are you going to be in the next year if someone wants to come and see you at any events?
Well, my book is available on Amazon.
There it is. Successful Transformational Change in a Fire and EMS Department. I love it.
It's how a focused team created a revenue recovery program in 6 months from scratch.
Nice. And where are you going to be speaking this year?
Well, I don't have anything specifically. I'm trying to get to, firefighter behavioral health and wellness conferences like the one I mentioned. It was in Ohio. Our annual conference of FFPA will be next October. We're working on a couple of different cities to nail down a location for that. Just ready to go wherever, whenever, and however. Okay. But it's like I tell people all the time, us freelance writers, we don't have a real big travel and conference budget.
There you go. If someone wants to get the privilege of hearing you speak, inviting you to consult, how do we get a hold of you, sir?
The best way to do that is Chief Avsec, all lowercase, at firepsychology.org.
Beautiful. Robert Avsec, it has been an absolute pleasure, an honor, and a privilege to have you here. We went a little bit over, and I loved every minute of it. And I'm going to go ahead and do my best to get in touch with you in the future to see if we might have you help co-host and keep these discussions going and dig deeper, do some deep dives with more of our members. So I've enjoyed having you on. You can expect me asking you to come on and visit with us again. You've got a lifetime of wisdom and you share it well. I love your analogies. And, I love your sense of purpose, sir. So I want to thank you on behalf of the First Responder Behavioral Health Institute and the show ENROUTE. Thank you for joining us for today's episode.
My pleasure. And thank you, Joe.
Thank you. I'm Joseph Brigandi. Thank you for joining us for this episode of ENROUTE. ENROUTE is a production of the First Responder Behavioral Health Institute. To learn more about us, head on over to FRBH.